Intense battles between Israel and Hamas are raging around hospitals in Gaza, putting medics and patients on the front line of the fighting.
Russia continues to shell Ukraine's eastern cities as the EU considers a 12th sanctions package on the Kremlin.
EU foreign affairs ministers condemn Hamas for using hospitals and civilians in them as shields, while at the same time urging Israel to show maximum restraint.
Sadness and uncertainty for an Icelandic town abandoned after scientists predicted a volcanic eruption was imminent.
EU countries explore the idea of placing migrants outside the EU while analysing their asylum requests.
Battles between Israel and Hamas around hospitals are forcing thousands of Palestinians to flee from some of the last perceived safe places in northern Gaza. At least 11,240 Palestinians have been killed, including 4,630 children and 3,130 women by the Israeli military since October the 7th. That's according to the Hamas-run health ministry. The World Health Organization has warned Gaza's biggest hospital, Al-Shifa, is nearly a cemetery, with bodies piling up inside and outside. Images of premature babies struggling to survive without functioning incubators has heightened international concerns for all patients in the hospital without power. The suffering had President Biden calling on Israel to change tactics.
And it's my hope and expectation that there will be less intrusive action relative to the hospital.
Israel's military has released a video from what it claims was a children's hospital that its forces moved into over the weekend. It shows weapons it said were found inside, as well as rooms in the basement where it believes the militants were holding some of the hostages they abducted during the initial attack.
I want you to understand, this kind of gear is a gear for a major fight. These are explosives. These are vests with explosives. Yeah, it's a body vest for terrorists to explode on forces, among hospitals, among patients.
At least 1,200 Israelis have died, mostly civilians killed in the initial Hamas attack. Palestinian militants are holding around 200 hostages. One of them's been declared dead by her captors, saying she died in an Israeli airstrike.
The European Union is condemning Hamas for using hospitals and civilians in them as shields, while at the same time urging Israel to show maximum restraint. This is the double message of the 27 member states to both Hamas and Israel in view of how the situation in Gaza's hospitals is deteriorating.
We ask Israel to show maximum restraint in order to save civilian lives. We condemn the use by Hamas of people at hospitals as shields, but also we express our concern for the dire situation of the hospitals that are being heavily affected by the bombing.
Joseph Borrell will go to the region to meet with leaders and discuss the situation. According to Hamas, all hospitals in the north of Gaza are now out of service. EU foreign affairs ministers gathered in Brussels on Monday to discuss the situation, who say they are concerned.
Il faut voir ce qui se passe dans les hôpitaux à Gaza. Ce ne sont pas des champs de bataille. Et il faut écouter, à mon avis, les médecins sans frontières, la direction de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, qui disent que les gens, les patients qui sont en station intensive, ils n'ont aucune chance. Il n'y a plus d'oxygène, il n'y a plus d'eau, il n'y a plus de médicaments, donc ces gens vont mourir.
But divisions remain at the European level. While officially Brussels is asking for humanitarian pauses to let more aid into Gaza, some countries, including Spain and Belgium, are asking for a ceasefire. But Germany does not want to go so far.
Ich verstehe total den Impuls in dieser furchtbaren Situation, wo unschuldige Kinder, Menschen, Frauen, Mütter, Familien nicht nur so furchtbar leiden, sondern ums Leben kommen, verstehe ich den Impuls nach einem Waffenstillstand. Aber Impulse reichen eben nicht aus, um Menschen zu helfen, um wirklich Sicherheit und Frieden zu garantieren.
The European Union says all civilians must be allowed to leave the combat zone in Gaza and that any humanitarian pauses must happen immediately.
At least 3 people were killed and 6 were injured during Russian shelling of the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson. Russian troops abandoned the city and the western bank of the Dnipro River in the region last year, but now regularly shells those areas from positions on the eastern bank. On November 12th, Russian troops also reportedly targeted the city of Kharkiv with an S-300 anti-aircraft missile system, but caused no casualties. In Brussels, EU officials are finalizing the last details of a proposed new package of sanctions on Russia. Since the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the EU has applied 11 packages of sanctions to diminish the Kremlin's ability to finance the war. According to EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell, the latest package will include new export bans, among them diamonds, and actions to tighten the oil price cap, to decrease the revenue that Russia is getting from selling its oil.
Poland's pro-EU parties have scored their first victory in the new parliament, with their candidate Szymon Hołownia elected Speaker of the lower house. It's the first parliamentary session since the October elections. Law and Justice won the most votes, but not enough for an outright victory.
Polacy tą ogromną frekwencją powiedzieli nam bardzo wyraźnie: dość już tego, co było. Ma się zmienić nie tylko partia, ma się zmienić polityka. Ona zaczęła się psuć od Sejmu i od Sejmu musi zacząć się jej naprawa.
An alliance of pro-European Union parties, led by former Prime Minister Donald Tusk, says it's ready to form government. President Andrzej Duda has given Law and Justice the opportunity to try to do that first.
Russian activist Ksenia Fadeyeva, who's an ally of jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny, has herself been jailed for alleged extremism. She's facing up to 12 years in prison. Fadeyeva was previously under house arrest, but the court ruled it too lenient. Fadeyeva's an anti-corruption champion, but is now classified as a terrorist. Navalny's currently serving 19 years in prison and is also on extremism charges. His associates face a growing crackdown, intensifying since Russia's Ukraine invasion. As the imminent threat of a volcanic eruption in Iceland becomes more evident, residents of a threatened village have returned to their homes to salvage their belongings. Grindavik has been hit by a series of small earthquakes in recent weeks. After being ordered to evacuate, residents were allowed to return briefly to collect valuables and essential items.
Actually, there's just like this tension loss, because now I've actually gone and seen my house for the first time since the Friday. So now it's just like a tension coming down, and well, I'm really emotional. That's basically how I'm feeling right now.
Only 2 people per vehicle were allowed into the area. For some, it was a quick dash to rescue pets or check on farm animals. For others, it was a window to retrieve irreplaceable items of sentimental value. No one knows when they'll be able to come back for good or what they'll discover when they do.
Parking migrants outside the EU while analysing their asylum requests. Italy paved the way, other countries may follow soon. The Italian government recently struck a deal with Albania to build their 2 reception centres hosting 3,000 people at a time. This includes those rescued in the Mediterranean Sea by Italian authorities, excluding minors, pregnant women and people with disabilities. Despite being located in Albanian territory, the centres would be subject to Italian jurisdiction, something that could be a violation of EU law. The European Commission for the moment remains cautious on the topic, and after almost a week, its analysis of a 9-page document is still ongoing.
We are in contact with the Italian authorities on this matter. We have just received the protocol between the Italian and Albanian authorities, and we are assessing it. So we will not be able to go into further details until we have fully assessed it.
Meanwhile, the idea of externalizing asylum procedures is being floated across Europe. Berlin is exploring this possibility, even if there are some reservations from Chancellor Olaf Scholz's socialists. Austria is suggesting to the European Commission that asylum procedures be done from outside of Europe, as Vienna's Interior Minister Gernot Kahner said after signing a migration and security agreement with the UK. Denmark went even further by passing a law allowing the processing of asylum seekers outside Europe, even if it's still in search of a partner country to work with. Processing asylum applications outside the EU is not a new idea in Europe, but it has so far never been successful.
If you look back in history, these kind of proposals never went ahead for a number of reasons. There are legal questions about their impact for fundamental rights protections. There are also policy, moral, and practical questions that prevented these ideas from going ahead.
These kind of deals will probably be promoted again in the future, but in order to do so, they will have to comply with new EU laws on migration, currently under discussion.